The Walt Disney Company recently filed a motion to dismiss a lawsuit brought forth by former Mandalorian and Star Wars star Gina Carano. In that lawsuit, Gina Carano had alleged that the Walt Disney Company was engaged in discriminatory practices under California labor law. Now, the interesting thing about the motion to dismiss was the fact that the Walt Disney Company was once again arguing a First Amendment issue, whereby the state discrimination in labor law did not apply in this case because of who Disney is and their inherent First Amendment rights. And they brought up a lot of, frankly, and seemingly erroneous and irrelevant prior case precedent. But what was really interesting about this motion to dismiss is what the Walt Disney Company admitted to in it. And frankly, it was shocking.
Renegade Online.
Gina Carano fires back at Disney over motion to dismiss lawsuit over Mandalorian exit. They will fire you if you say anything they disagree with. Now, to remind folks what happened here is that Gina had filed a lawsuit alleging that Disney had violated California state labor laws that protect employees from being punished for speaking their mind, for being fired for their political opinions. Disney has pushed back on this because I think there's some important points, and there's some things that Disney surprisingly admits to in here that I wouldn't have expected. The studio filed a motion to dismiss the lawsuit on Tuesday, arguing that it had a First Amendment right to fire the actor and that it had a constitutional right not to associate Disney's artistic expression with Carano's free speech. Disney has confirmed what has been known all along. They will fire you if you say anything that they disagree with, even if they have to misrepresent, malign, and mischaracterize you to do it, Gina Carano wrote on X, formerly known as Twitter, on Thursday morning. They are now, she says, on record letting everyone who works for them know that Disney will take any chance they get to control what you say, what you think, or they will attempt to destroy your career. Glad we cleared that up. The First Amendment does not allow Disney to wantonly discriminate, which is what they have done in my case, and frankly have now admitted that they did. If you ever wanted to know what today's Disney values are, they just told you. And she's bang on that one. And let me tell you what, I read through this. This is the document. This is the motion to dismiss. It was filed by the Walt Disney Company, asking the California court to throw her case out. Legal Mindset has talked about this. Ron Coleman has talked about this. I'm going to give you my thoughts. Obviously, I'm not an attorney, so I'm not looking at this from a very well-learned legal perspective, but enough common sense that I feel comfortable we can have this conversation, because as a layperson when it comes to the law, I'm reading this not through professional, educated legal eyes. I'm reading this just as me, as VR. And I want to tell you what jumped out at me, okay? Because I know the lawyers are going to go for a lot of the case law and stuff like this, but I'm going to tell you what jumped out at me. So in this document, Disney, what they say is, as Carano's own fame rose with her character, talking about Cara Dune, Carano began engaging with show fans and the public in a manner that, in Disney's view, came to distract from and undermine Disney's own expressive efforts. As her complaint alleges, Carano made public declarations, blaming pandemic-related closure orders and vaccine mandates for causing widespread suicides and murders, attacking the legitimacy of the 2020 presidential election, and mocking people who identify their pronouns to show support for transgender rights. Now, a couple of things in here. She made declarations blaming pandemic-related closure orders and vaccine mandates for causing widespread suicide and murders. I hate to tell you, the data shows that that's true. The Disney request for dismissal goes on to say the coup de grace came in February of 2021 when Carano admittedly reposted on Instagram a post comparing criticism of politically conservative viewpoints to the Holocaust in Nazi Germany, as Carano told the world, quote, Jews were beaten in the streets. And again, she didn't say this. She was reposting something, I believe. Jews were, or maybe these were her words that she typed in the tweet, but the tweet itself was something she reposted. Jews were beaten in the streets, not by Nazi soldiers, but by their neighbors, even by children, because history is edited. Most people today don't realize that they don't get to the point where Nazi soldiers could easily round up thousands. The government first made their own neighbors hate them simply for being Jewish. How is that any different for hating someone for their political views? Now, Disney, of course, decided that this was abhorrent and terrible in the comparison to the Holocaust, which, again, I don't see that here. And a lot of other people didn't see that here either. She made a point that when you just sponsor unmitigated hatred against a group of people for political viewpoints, eventually bad things might happen. That's it. That's all most people took from this. But of course, this is not what Disney thought. They go on to say more than 2 years later, Carano filed a lawsuit alleging that by disassociating its artistic performances from Carano and the high-profile controversy that she provoked, which again, did she really provoke a high-profile controversy, or was much of the controversy provoked by Disney itself? And as we showed you earlier, their giant army of AI bots on social media. I wonder. Can't wait to see Discovery on this one. Disney violated, or she claims that Disney violated, California labor laws prohibiting employers from taking adverse employment actions on the basis of an employee's political activity. Carano claims all are barred by the First Amendment. Then they go on to cite some interesting cases in here that I thought was something fascinating here. They say what state law, in this case California state law, cannot do, however, is force entities that do create speech products to speak through writers or singers or actors whose own speech and public profile could, in the employer's view, compromise the employer's ability to express itself in its own chosen manner. I want you to remember that phrase real carefully for what I'm going to read in just a couple of minutes from this thing, okay? Carano's suit contravenes that rule. It's an impermissible effort to invoke state power to override a private entity's decisions about what to say in its own art, Disney's own art, and how to say it. This complaint should be dismissed. That's what Disney is requesting that the court do. Now, what Disney is suggesting here is that there is, and they cite a few examples, there are pieces of legal precedent that the Supreme Court in some cases have ruled on, where the First Amendment right is not an absolute, or it is an absolute protection for businesses engaged in the kind of business that Disney is engaged in, the business of creating speech. This is their argument, right? And what they're saying here that I find interesting is what they compare things to. This is what it seems to me that Disney's actually trying to argue, is that this California law can't apply to them because they're in the business of making speech. And what they cite are these federal cases or these other cases that went before, in some cases, the Supreme Court. They cite a case, Hurley versus Irish American Gay, Lesbian, and Bisexual Group of Boston. Thus, the government cannot compel private individuals and entities to express messages they don't want to express. In Hurley, the Supreme Court unanimously held that the organizer of a parade had a constitutional right to exclude from the parade group seeking to impart a message to the organizers that they do not wish to convey on then contentious issues surrounding gay rights. So they're citing this case where a gay rights group who was doing a parade, a public event, they didn't want to have certain people march in the parade with them who might be holding up signs or shouting chants or something that the group did not politically agree with. Okay, that makes sense. And in that case, they said, well, that's protected speech for the group, right? The Supreme Court extended this principle to hold that entities engaged in expression, this is part of the same case, expression have a First Amendment right to select the employees who channel that expression. So they have a right to select the employees that channel the same expression they have in a group like this that is expressive speech, even where those employment choices would otherwise violate state anti-discrimination law. So again, what they're saying is Disney is one of these privileged groups where this California state law can't apply because their First Amendment free speech rights supersede this. This is another one of these goofball First Amendment free speech arguments that Disney's been making all over the place. We all saw what happened in the case of Florida and Reedy Creek. Didn't go well for Disney. I don't think this is going to go well either. I'm going to explain why in a minute. In Boy Scouts of America versus Dale, the court considered the Boy Scouts' decision to fire an openly gay assistant scoutmaster because the organization at the time believed that homosexuality was inconsistent with Boy Scouts' values. The court held that this choice was protected by the First Amendment, and thus that the Boy Scouts had a complete defense to a New Jersey anti-discrimination law, probably similar to what they're dealing with on this California one, that barred employment decisions made on the basis of sexual orientation. So again, they're saying that anti-discrimination law at the state level fell subservient to the First Amendment claim in this case because of who the organization was, which I get. But again, these examples, a little bit different than what's going on here with Disney, isn't it? The First Amendment fully protects Disney's decision to exclude Gina Carano from its own artistic speech to avoid associating that speech with views that Disney considered offensive and disruptive of its efforts to spread its own message as it deemed appropriate. I'll read that again. The First Amendment fully protects Disney's decision to exclude Carano from its own Disney's own artistic speech to avoid associating that speech, Gina Carano's speech, with views that Disney considered offensive and disruptive of its efforts, Disney's efforts to spread its own message, Disney's own message, as it deemed appropriate. Now, let me give you the problem with this. This is the stupidest argument Disney could make because they just let the cat out the bag. What Disney is saying here, they're trying to compare these issues with Boy Scouts of America, an LGBTQ parade group, a magazine. There was another case in there with a trade publication or a magazine not wanting to hire certain editorial staff that didn't have their political opinions. Okay, let me tell you what the difference is with those things. Their political opinions or what they represented were materially connected to the job. If the Boy Scouts wanted to raise young men in a traditional Catholic or Christian manner consistent with religious beliefs, which is what Boy Scouts traditionally have been, and if their religious beliefs said that we don't want to have homosexuality represented in our group, that was their right. Having an openly gay scoutmaster in that case would have run afoul in his daily operation of working with these kids, would it not? The same thing with the parade, like I mentioned earlier. You got people holding up protest signs in your parade that might not agree with what the rest of your parade and protest is about. I can understand that too. Gina Carano is an actress on a television show that reads a script. She doesn't write the script. She doesn't direct the show. She recites lines. In other words, is Gina Carano's politics, was it ever introduced in The Mandalorian? Were Gina Carano's politics on display? Did she write her own lines? Did Gina Carano come in and ad-lib stuff about Trump and the election and COVID? And no. I don't see how it relates to these other cases where the people involved in these other cases, where this free speech of association, hiring who you want to hire, which is fine and dandy, really comes into play here. She's on a scripted show. She's not editorializing newspaper content. She's not presenting herself as an openly gay person in a religious-based organization like the Boy Scouts. Again, different situation. Gina did this on her own time, on her own personal Twitter page, on her own personal Instagram page. Never had any impact on what she did on the show at all, ever. It's ridiculous. So the cases they're citing here, in my mind, bear no resemblance to what the situation is here, to where they can also say, well, the California anti-discrimination law and the labor law doesn't apply to Disney in this case because we are also a creator of speech. You're a creator of entertainment. And so show me where Gina Carano's speech that you don't like ever actually impacted or could have possibly impacted anything that you were doing with Star Wars The Mandalorian. Here's the real kicker. Like I said, remember that line I told you to keep your eye on for later on? I'll read it again. because I cannot overstate this enough. What state law cannot do, however, talking about the California state law, is force entities that do create speech products to speak through writers or singers or actors whose own speech and public profile could, in the employer's view, Disney's view, compromise the employer, Disney's, ability to express itself in its own chosen manner. So again, Gina Carano, what she was saying, Disney didn't like that, and it was violating the imagery that Disney wanted to hold consistent with its own company. Disney was entitled to protect its creative speech in the Star Wars series from association with views Disney and many viewers and potential viewers considered offensive and contrary to Disney's values. Okay, Disney, you open the door. Now let's walk in. This apparently, according to Disney's own legal document, what Disney filed in court, where they said Disney is entitled to protect its creative speech in the Star Wars series from association with views that Disney and many viewers and potential viewers considered offensive and contrary to Disney's values. This is why they think they're protected for getting rid of Gina, but they didn't get rid of Pedro. This stood. Why? Ostensibly, because of Disney's own words here, this, right here on your screen, complies with Disney's values. That's what they're tacitly admitting in this. That this right here, this post from Din Djarin, from Mando, from Pedro Pascal, comparing the Confederacy to Nazi Germany and to Trump supporters. Half the country. It's okay that Pedro Pascal went out and insulted, and this wasn't the only time, and many others did it, Mark Hamill, lots of people that worked at Disney, Lucasfilm. That means that Disney is taking ownership of what? All of their employees' tweets? Is that what they're saying? Are they saying that they had a right to get rid of Gina based on this discriminatory practice, and that the California labor laws that prohibit them doing this do not apply based on all this other case evidence and case precedents that they cited, that it doesn't apply to them somehow because, I don't know. Figure that one out. I can't. But what Disney does definitively say in this is that they take ownership of this. That's what I read. They take ownership of not only Pedro, but all the employees that went on tirades on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, on social media, everywhere, and chastised half the country, made fun of conservatives, and referred to them as Nazis. They denigrated most of their fans. And in here, they're acting like Disney was thus entitled to protect its creative speech from association with views that Disney and many viewers and potential viewers considered offensive and contrary to Disney's values. What the hell is this? This is most of your core audience right here. Whether Disney likes it or not, you wonder why their theatrical performance is in the toilet? I mean, I don't know what else to say other than if Disney doesn't mean that, then they've got a lot of explaining to do, because they're allowing their employees and their actors and their writers and directors to go out and post abhorrent things like that, truly abhorrent things about conservatives. That's okay. They're not getting rid of those people. They're not failing to renew contracts based on that. They're not making a big stink about it. No, they singled out Gina Carano because they didn't like her politics, because they said, well, that's not in line with what Disney wants. That's not in line with what our viewers and maybe our potential viewers would want. But yet, this is cool. This apparently aligns with Disney values.
Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.